Social and political organizations around the world reiterate their solidarity with Venezuela and reject the U.S. military deployment in the Caribbean. In Honduras, the Liberty and Refoundation Party formally requested the annulment of the presidential elections after confirming the electoral fraud perpetrated by the Honduran bipartisanship with the support of U.S. interference. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum led at Zócalo Square the event for the celebration of the 7 years of the government's fourth transformation plan. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. Several countries around the world hold a Solidarity Day for Peace in the Caribbean in response to the military threats imposed by Washington on Caribbean countries. Social movements and activists from several countries expressed their solidarity with Venezuela in the face of the U.S. empire siege. The organizations condemn the interventionist actions of the U.S. government that endangered the Caribbean as a zone of peace. For its part, the Venezuelan government denounced the false arguments that the Trump administration claims, the alleged fight against drug trafficking, which is aimed at attacking and taking over the natural resources of its country. Citizens of Puerto Rico defend the sovereignty of the peoples of Latin America and the Caribbean. With banners and slogans, they call for peace and the closure of U.S. military bases in their country and the region. And Cuba also joined the Day of Solidarity with Venezuela. At the Cuban Institute of Friendship with the Peoples, the Cuban people's support for the Bolivarian Revolution and for peace in Latin America and the Caribbean was reaffirmed. The event brought together representatives from ICAP, the Cuban chapter of the Anti-Fascist International, the Venezuelan diplomatic mission in Cuba, and social organizations who expressed their support for the Venezuelan people in the face of external aggression and threats. With slogans such as "Venezuela is not a threat, Venezuela is hope," and rejection of the threat against Venezuela and all of Latin America and the Caribbean, Cuba's commitment to the defense of sovereignty and self-determination of peoples were ratified. And in a gesture of regional support, popular movements in Brazil reiterated their solidarity with Venezuela in the face of escalating military aggression by the U.S. government in the Caribbean. Under the slogan, "In solidarity with Venezuela and in defense of peace in Latin America and the Caribbean," a total of 18 organizations and 38 activists from Brazil signed a joint declaration categorically rejecting the recent military threats by the United States in the region. The document demands an end to the U.S. military presence in the Caribbean Sea and calls on the Brazilian government to take a firm stance on the issue. In turn, the declaration denounces that the deployment of a U.S. nuclear submarine violates the Tlatelolco Treaty, which declares Latin America and the Caribbean a nuclear weapons-free zone. And social movements and indigenous peoples in Belize rejected the United States military actions in the Caribbean against Venezuela. A group of indigenous Zacatecos Mayans from northern Belize reaffirmed their support for the Venezuelan government in the face of escalating aggression by the United States in the Caribbean. This show of solidarity joins an anti-imperialist forum convened by various countries on a global day of action in support of the Venezuelan government and in rejection of the U.S. military deployment in the Caribbean, described by social movements as a multi-dimensional war against the South American nation. As the U.S. government prepares to start another catastrophic war in Latin America, people gather in different cities to tell President Trump, U.S. hands off Venezuela. Thousands of demonstrators flood streets across the U.S. to protest potential military action against Venezuela. From Washington, D.C. to major cities nationwide, citizens demand peace, diplomacy, and an end to interventionist policies. And in the province of Vizcaya, Spain, dozens of people mobilized to oppose the imperialist policies of Washington in Venezuela under the pretext of the fight against drug trafficking. Italy also spoke out against the imperialist policies of the United States. From the city of Florence, social movements protested to demand an end to the aggression while expressing their solidarity with the Venezuelan people. And in Belgium, members of the Latin American Solidarity Coordinating Committee expressed their support for the Venezuelan people and government in the face of escalating aggression by the United States. From the city of Brussels, the collective categorically rejected the growing U.S. threats against Venezuela, an offensive that represents a flagrant violation of international law and threatens the declaration of Latin America and the Caribbean as a zone of peace. In this sense, the activists advocated for peace in the region and the cessation of imperial hostilities that coerce the sovereignty and self-determination of all the peoples of the continent. With this demonstration, Belgium joins the expressions of solidarity that have taken place in different countries to reject the unilateral sanctions of the United States against the Venezuelan people and its attempt to start a war in the region. Also in this context, the International Anti-imperialist Summit of Senegal voiced its support for Venezuela.
From Dakar, Senegal, we send you our warmest regards and unwavering support for the Bolivarian Revolution in the face of attacks from the United States and threats to invade Venezuela. No to war to Venezuela.
And Venezuela's Foreign Minister Ivan Hill thanked the South African government for the messages of solidarity and support sent to the Venezuelan people in the face of escalating U.S. aggression, reiterating the unity of both peoples in the construction of a multipolar world. Through his social media accounts, the Venezuelan Foreign Minister expressed hugs and gratitude from Venezuela to Angie Motshekga, Minister of Defense, and Buddy Manamela, Minister of Higher Education of South Africa, members of the National Executive Council, for their message of solidarity and support for the Venezuelan people. Venezuela and South Africa together in building a more just, multicentric and multipolar world. Also in the United States on Thursday, the first meeting of the Congressional Committee investigating government operations against vessels in the Caribbean was held in Washington. The committee's probe examined a U.S. strike launched on September 2nd on a vessel in Caribbean sea waters, which represented the first action of an operation by the Washington government to allegedly combat drug trafficking in the region, which has killed at least 80 people to date. In this regard, the Congressional meeting reviewed videos of the attack which showed the execution of 2 survivors of the strike after they raised their hands in surrender. On that same day, media outlets revealed that the Pentagon's legal advisors warned from the outset that the action was illegal.
But what I saw in that room was one of the most troubling things I've seen in my time in public service. You have 2 individuals in clear distress, without any means of locomotion, with a destroyed vessel, who were killed by the United States.
And now we have our first break coming up. Remember, you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. Venezuela's Defense Minister Vladimir Padrino Lopez affirmed that the country plays a key role in the construction of a new world order based on sovereignty and a libertarian spirit. During the Christmas military community event this Saturday in Caracas, he emphasized that the nation has a libertarian spirit that opposes any imperial control. The minister affirmed that Venezuela has been resisting and building a sovereign model for 26 years. At the event, community leaders expressed their support for the government of President Nicolás Maduro and the organization of popular power in the region.
Every productive activity that is developed will have a counterpart. It will have something working against it. There will be something that wants to stop it. U.S. imperialism wants to stop the socialist advance of the homeland. To speak of socialist progress is to speak of national identity. It is to speak of the meaning of homeland. It is to speak of the constitution of a prosperous, productive society that runs on its own tracks, and that homeland is called Venezuela.
On Saturday, Caracas, the capital of Venezuela, hosted the National Constituent Plenary of the indigenous community within the framework of the defense of Venezuela's national sovereignty. Representatives from 34 indigenous peoples of the Venezuelan territory participated in the gathering with the objective of promoting the work of the communities and discuss their demands presented at municipal assemblies. Precisely, the preservation of the country's ancestral culture through tending to the needs and demands of the indigenous communities is contemplated in the government's 7 transformations plan. In this context, participants reaffirmed their commitment to the defense of the Venezuelan territory against the ongoing threats and harassment from the United States government. The president of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro, held a telephone conversation this Saturday with the president of Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, in which they exchanged positions, criteria, and assessments on global geopolitics, as well as on the most recent global events that affect the stability and future of humanity. Through a statement, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan expressed his deep concern about the threats recently looming over Venezuela, particularly the military deployment and various actions aimed at disrupting peace and security in the Caribbean. He expressed his solidarity with the Venezuelan people and his commitment to defending international law and the sovereignty of nations. For his part, President Nicolás Maduro explained in detail the illegal, disproportionate, unnecessary, and even extravagant nature of these threats, making it clear that Venezuela continues to work steadfastly for economic growth, national peace, and political stability. Finally, President Nicolás Maduro extended an invitation to President Recep Tayyip Erdogan to visit Venezuela on the occasion of the 5th meeting of the Venezuela-Türkiye Joint Commission, scheduled to be held in 2026, where the framework for political, social, economic, and cultural cooperation between the two countries will be expanded and deepened. And in Honduras, the Liberty and Refoundation Party formally requested the annulment of the presidential elections after confirming the electoral fraud perpetrated by the Honduran bipartisanship with the support of U.S. interference. In a statement, the LIBRE Party called for, first, to receive the present action for administrative nullification of the counts carried out by the voting boards for the election of the president, presidential appointees, and deputies to the Central American Parliament, together with the accompanying documents and evidence. The text continues, second, that a hearing be scheduled within 3 days following the notification of the admission of this action for nullity in order to proceed with the admission and examination of evidence. And third, to declare valid the administrative action for nullification of the counting of votes carried out by the voting boards for the election of the president, presidential appointees, and deputies to the Central American Parliament on the grounds of nullification established in Article 298, Paragraph 4 of the Electoral Law of Honduras, and therefore that the election be repeated in each and every one of the voting boards at the presidential level within 10 days following notification of the resolution. We have our second break coming up. Before we invite you to visit our Facebook page at teleSUR English, there you'll be able to watch our top stories, special live coverage, and much more. Follow our page and activate the notification button to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Have a fun short break, and go away. Welcome back. The President of Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum, affirmed that her country would not give in to the pressure of the media war promoted by right-wing sectors. On Saturday, the Mexican president gave an overview of the achievements of the fourth transformation promoted by the Morena party. In her speech, she denounced the opposition's campaigns focused on undermining her government's reputation. Earlier, the Mexican people mobilized to express their support for President Claudia Sheinbaum, who, according to polls, has an approval rating of over 70%.
During these days, it has been demonstrated that even though they can carry out dirty campaigns in social networks, even though they try to buy bots and robots, even if they try to do alliances with groups of power in Mexico and abroad, even they can hire some analysts and communicators in order to spread lies in news outlets, even if they continue to try to sell the idea to the world that Mexico is not a free and democratic country, even if they continue to spread alleged experts that are in making up fiction stories, even if they try to weave new alliances with conservatism here and abroad, even if they try to do all of that, they will not win over the people of Mexico or their president.
Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum highlighted the social progress achieved during the fourth transformation.
We went from a country governed by an oligarchy, where presidents and institutions, public institutions, were only serving a few that thought they owned Mexico, to a true democracy, where the government works in the favor of everyone, but especially for those who need it the most. So let this be heard. We came to government in order to continue and to deepen that fourth transformation of the public life in Mexico.
Mexican President also highlighted the success of the economic policies implemented over the last 7 years.
With the transformation, the minimum wage went from 88 daily pesos to 315 pesos as of January 1st, 2026, a 154% raise. From 2025 to 2026, the rise will be of a 13%. That is almost 3 times over inflation. The average wage in a monthly term has also increased in a 77% in real terms. Inflation is controlled. As October ends this year, it was just over 3.5%, and direct foreign investment has reached a historical record in the third trimester of 2025 with over $40 billion.
President Sheinbaum emphasized that 13 million Mexicans were lifted out of poverty during the administration of Andrés Manuel López Obrador.
These policies have been able to give way to that great achievement of Andrés Manuel López Obrador of reducing inequalities. 13.5 million of Mexicans came out of poverty.
Mexican President Sheinbaum reaffirmed that during her administration she will fight for the Mexican people to have a dignified life.
And we will continue to fight so that Mexicans can eat 3 times a day with healthy meals, have access to education, healthcare, and a household. We do not believe in consumism and the power of money, in greed, and no, we do not kneel before the powerful. We believe in a Mexico that is full of freedom and justice, a sovereign Mexico of true democracy, where whoever is leading will always be the people of Mexico. So I repeat, we are
On Friday, the United Nations Children's Fund (UNICEF) warned that more than 4.1 million children in Southeast Asia have had their education interrupted since the end of November due to flooding and other climate disasters. The organization's spokesperson Ricardo Pires regretted that many of these students in countries such as Vietnam, the Philippines, Thailand, and Indonesia have faced the devastating effects of typhoons and floods, forcing them to live in shelters, some of them without basic services. The agency recalled that the climate crisis halted the education of 242 million students globally in 2024 alone. It also warned that the pattern of disasters in Asia is of unprecedented magnitude, leaving communities no time to recover and children without the education they need. We have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. So join us on social media: Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.